The world here does not belong to men. We are merely permitted to walk through it, provided we move with the silence of a shadow. The morning mist clings to the knees of the great oaks, thick and white like the breath of the earth. Overhead, the canopy is a molted ceiling of radiant copper and gold, shimmering in a wind that tastes of the incoming frost. Each step I take is a calculated gamble. The floor of the forest is a carpet of sodden moss and brittle beech mass. To snap a single twig is to announce my hunger to every living thing within a league. I am wrapped in a heavy tunic of checkered wool, dyed with the juice of crushed berries and woad until it matches the shifting grays of the bark. Over my shoulders lies the pelt of a gray wolf, hunted several seasons ago, and the scars from the eventual final fight I still bear. Just one of countless fights for survival. Its weight now is a familiar pressure, pinned at my collar by a singular brooch of hammered bronze. My legs are bound in strips of hide, cross-wrapped tight to keep the brambles from tearing my skin, ending in soft-soled shoes of elk skin that my wife made for me. They are thick enough that they keep out the damp cold of the autumnal forest floor, yet soft that allows me to feel the pulse of the earth beneath my feet as I make each careful, silent step. In my right hand I grip my Phrygia. Its shaft is ash wood, fire-hardened and polished by a combination of years of use and the oils of my palm. The head is a narrow leaf of iron, honed against river stone until it can bite through the thickest boar hide. It is a light, balanced tool of both reach and deadly precision, and it has been in my clan for generations. At my belt hangs a flint striker and a knife of bone, the same one I had crafted for myself for the very first hunt I went on alone. I remember how Father had beamed at me that day. I hope not to need them until the blood work begins. The silence is broken by the rhythmic strikes of a woodpecker, a sound like a hammer on a hollow shield. Then the smell hits me. Carried down the wind is the very heavy, musky scent of a stag in rut. I freeze. My breath ghosts in the air, a fleeting spirit. There, past the silvered trunk of a fallen birch, the mist ripples. A shadow shifts, darker than the trees. I sink into a crouch, my muscles coiling like a trapped spring. The forest floor is cold, damp, and smelling of a crisp, sweet rot, but I do not even notice. There is only the heartbeat in my ears and the weight of the iron in my hand. The gods of the great forests are watching. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Courtney, and welcome to the Time Travelers Club. Welcome back, everyone. Here we are for season 2 of the show. It felt like for a while we were never going to get here, but it's finally time. We loved exploring Egypt, Rome, and the lands under the warm sun of the ancient Mediterranean. But it's time we moved on. We are leaving behind palms, dunes, and reedy marshes of Egypt, the rolling hills of Greece, and the olive groves of southern Italy. We are heading north now, through Cisalpine Gaul until we meet the Great Wall that separates the little boot of Italy from the rest of Europe. Those regions beyond the looming crags and the snow of the Alps were wilder at this time, a mysterious place full of little understood peoples who, while connected by a similar language and related cultures, were far flung from each other and hardly unified. The ancient land of Germania would continue this way until the late 19th century when the German unification took place. Until that point, the people of this region would sometimes come together, perhaps for conquest or to defend themselves from it, or even perhaps because they were conquered themselves. But until modern times, this had always been a temporary affair. The ancient Romans feared these lands, and while they made attempts to control it, swallow it like it had with so many other cultures, like Cleopatra's precious Egypt, Vercingetorix and his momentarily united Gauls, and the Boudicca's bold and independent Britannic peoples, it was the ancient tribes of northern and eastern Europe who would prove to be their match, a halt to the seemingly unstoppable might of Rome, and one day its peoples would be the ones to conquer them instead. But that is a story for another day. However, this season is not about the grand stories, great figures, or a legendary romance for the ages. Instead, we will be focusing on a particular aspect of this culture and compare how that was treated at two very different times in German history. But we need to get a lay of the land, both literally in its geographic footprint and also a broad idea of some of this shared culture. We know very little about these peoples, though, as little to no written records from their own people survive, and the written sources we do have all tend to come secondhand by people who had very little desire to try and understand or glorify these fierce people, and who also liked to categorize thousands of separate tribes, states, and peoples so they fit neatly into one box. That's right! Rome is still here to give us bitchy commentary and fake news, as always. But thankfully, we have modern archaeology to help us.
And thank God for that.
I know.
So, to the Roman eye, Germania was a land of bristling forests and unhealthy marshes. That's a quote. While modern Germany is a landscape of tidy farms, industrial hubs, and managed woodlots, the Germania of 2 millennia ago, so that's roughly 100 BCE to 400 CE, was a sprawling, untamed wilderness that served as the ultimate frontier for the Roman Empire. The area the Romans would label as ancient Germania, often called Magna Germania or Greater Germania, was significantly larger than modern-day Germany. It was defined by major river systems rather than the political lines we recognize today. For example, its southern border was marked by the snaking Danube River, Europe's second longest river. It flows for over 2,800 kilometers from the Black Forest through 10 modern countries, including Germany, Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldova, and the Ukraine. Eventually, its journey ends when it empties out into the Black Sea, forming a vital historical, cultural, and economic artery for this section of the continent. To the west, it was marked off by another more concrete border, also due to a mighty river, this time the Rhine, a major European waterway flowing for over 1,300 kilometers from the Swiss Alps through 6 countries, those today being Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Austria, France, Germany, and the Netherlands, eventually emptying out into the North Sea and forming cultural borders, a vital transport artery and historically significant route lined with castles, vineyards, and industrial centers. It's famously known for its scenic Middle Rhine Gorge. That's where I believe a little Miss Mary Shelley wrote a certain book, or well, she was going through there anyway. So,
Indeed, I actually just got that one.
yeah. She just no big deal. At 18, she created an entire genre, without even trying, but and as it was also a hub for trade and inspiration in art and literature. To the north stretch the icy waters of the North and Baltic Seas. The Baltic Sea is a large brackish, that means low salinity sea in northern Europe, enclosed by land and connected to the Atlantic via narrow straits, bordered by the modern countries of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Russia, Poland, Germany, and the aptly named Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. It's characterized by its shallow depth, unique low diversity ecosystem, and significant freshwater input. And then finally, to the east, we have the Vistula River. The Vistula today is Poland's longest river and the ninth largest in Europe, rising in the Carpathians and flowing for approximately 1,047 kilometers. It forms a distinctive S-curve as it winds across Poland. It flows north, making its way through major cities today like Krakow and Warsaw before eventually emptying into the Baltic Sea near Danzig in via an extensive delta. It has served as a crucial waterway for transport, trade, and the exchange of culture for millennia.
Now, the most defining feature of the interior was the Hercynian Forest. So, Hercynia silva. This was not a single park, but a massive ancient canopy that stretched from the Rhine all the way to the Carpathian Mountains. It consisted of gargantuan oaks, European beech, and silver firs. The forest was so dense that Julius Caesar claimed a man could travel through it for 60 days without reaching the end. The ground was rarely flat. It was a labyrinth of steep ridges, like the modern Black Forest and Harz Mountains, and deep, shaded valleys where the sun rarely touched the floor.
You know what this reminds me of?
What's that?
It reminds me of in Token, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's like, and don't God, I can't remember it now, the name of it, but there's this great, humongous forest, right? Like right in the middle of Middle Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And in The Hobbit, that they actually have to go through it, and it takes like they have to like prep for that journey because it takes like it's supposed to take like months to get through it.
Oh,
Like you'll
absolutely.
be in there. So like I know Tolkien a little bit, you know, was really inspired by like actual history, especially from this time period. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe this story inspired that forest. I think that'd be really cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, for Roman legions, this forest was a green hell. Honestly, this sounds like my dream. I'm not gonna lie.
Me too. Like I'll go into the
The
forest with the elves.
like
Bye.
let's go. Bye. The lack of roads and the thickness of the undergrowth made it impossible to maintain the rigid square formations they favored, leading to one of the greatest disasters in Roman military history. Take that, Rome. Get fucked. So,
We'll get into it. We'll get into it.
so while the south was mountainous and wooded, the north, modern day Lower Saxony and the Netherlands, was a world of water. Vast quaking bogs and peat moors dominated the landscape. These were treacherous areas where a single misstep could lead to drowning in mud.
Oh my God. So, and I can relate. So
Oh, we're getting
little,
the story.
little story time. So I wasn't in this region, but I was in Bordeaux, which is in southern France, right? And that is also very famous for its estuary, right? And Courtney knows this story because it's like one of my favorite go-tos. So that's the day I learned what quicksand is like. And I almost became a bog body, that day.
Oh, yay, bog bodies.
Hmm, so I almost became an exhibit in a museum somewhere. So I was in Bordeaux, and it was part of a class trip, right? And it was the last day, the last couple hours. We had just came back from a place called Saint Emilion. Wonderful, beautiful. And so we had a couple hours to kill before we were going to take the train back to Paris as like a group, right? So I had told my professor, well, she's like our like like I don't know, herder, like shepherd, just keeping us all like on track. And most of these people are kids, right? I'm 30 something years old at that point, so like I'm a grown ass man. So she's a little less worried about me, which was her first mistake. But I told her like, hey, I want to collect water samples for my husband. Like she had known about this beforehand. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to head down to the river since it's such an important place. This river is very unique. It is a freshwater estuary. So it carries a lot of the nutrients from the ocean, but doesn't have the salinity, which is pretty rare, I guess. It's why it has crazy like tides for a river. Like tides aren't super common like that anyway, and like it can go like essentially rise 10 meters a day, right? Put a pin in that, might be important for the story. So I'm trying to find a way to get to the river, right? Because it's pretty far down, like in the main part of town. So I'm just following it down, right? And eventually I hit this point where there's this park, right? And then there's this like little wooded area. So I'm like, I hop the fence because that's something I kept doing over there for some reason. And I go into the wooded area.
You
I
absolute
know.
hooligan.
And every time I almost die, but did I learn my lesson? No.
So
I mean,
I
the
will keep
things
this in
I
mind
did,
when we go on our European adventure.
you need a baby leash for me. Like, I will definitely just yeet and like jump over things to go look at them. And not in a disrespectful way. I always approach these things with respect, right? I'm not trying to be some crazy tourist. I genuinely want to know more. I want to get up close and personal. I am a historian. I'm not looking to damage anything, but like I just want a chance to get intimate with it, and really, because there's things that I find, like for example, when I hopped a fence up in Normandy, I hopped the fence. I'm exploring this ancient castle, and I go down to the moat, which is now dry. And down there, I find carved into the stone Cox 19. It was like 1917, Canada, and I'm realizing that moment I'm standing in the spot where someone just like me from North America, far from home, was in a trench fighting for their life. Because I went into town after that and noticed all the bullet holes everywhere from World War One and Two. Like those bullets are still there. That damage is still visible today. So I wouldn't have known that. I wouldn't have had that experience if I hadn't done that. I'm not trying to take anything or vandalize anything or anything like that. And if I had hiked all the way up there, girl, like I wasn't just going to leave because the gate was closed. And so whoop, hop over the fence, make it taller. So sort of similar here. It's this wooded area in Bordeaux, and I go down, and it's like, oh, I'm level with it now, right? So there's this little like, not like I don't know how to describe it. It's just this little like drop off, right? It's like maybe 2-3 feet, and I see grass, and it goes right up to the edge of the water. I'm like, perfect. I can get my sample. I hop down and immediately sink up to my knees.
Yeah.
And the more you move, the more you get sucked down. And I'm right near this bridge. And that was the bridge we had taken to Saint Emilion earlier that day when my professor had told me that little fact about the tides. And that's when I noticed this really dark line pretty far above my head.
Yeah.
It's low tide. It's only going to get higher from here. So now I'm freaking out and I'm yelling and no one can hear me. I'm like, damn, 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 damn. Eventually I get out. I think clearly because I'm here. There's a log. I heave ho myself slowly over to the log and I use it for leverage to like grab the top of that ledge I had just jumped down from, slowly pull myself up. And just as I get over the edge of that ledge, the tree I had been using for leverage breaks away and floats down the river. I lost a boot in the mud. They were cute. They were my cute Chelsea boots. They had been my friends throughout this entire journey. And I was real mad. So I took the other boot, screamed into the woods, and threw the boot into the wilderness. And I had to change into my pajamas and walk through Bordeaux like that. And even the homeless guy at the train station was giving me side eye.
Breaking all the
And then my
cultural
professor
norms.
saw me and got immediately concerned because she's like, "Oh, no, your outfit's fine. It's not that bad." And that little and I had gotten that water sample. I had tucked into a little pocket on the shoulder of strap of my backpack, and then I took my other, carry-on bag, threw it over my shoulder. So now I'm at the train station. I'm like, well, at least it was worth it. I got the water, right? I smashed the bottle.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's real dangerous up in spots and don't. And to be fair, it's not like it looked like marshy grass. It just looked like a lawn, like green grass. Like I was not suspicious, and that's honestly what's scary. You could be crossing, and it looks fine, and all of a sudden you just sink.
And that's why as kids in North America, we are taught about quicksand, and especially the millennials. Especially the millennials. We had this like unreal fear of quicksand. Guess what, babes? It wasn't here. It's
Yeah, they
not
always make it
here.
like a
It's
jungle.
over in Europe.
They always make it like a jungle, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know, maybe
No.
there are, but I'm like, it's definitely it's where you'd least suspect it.
It's where you least expect.
They gave me an unrealistic expectation of where to find quicksand. Just saying.
Indeed. But even the coastline was unstable, right? It was shifting with the tides of the North Sea. Tribes like the Chauki lived on terps, or man-made mounds, to stay above the frequent floods. So, the wildlife of ancient Germania was far more diverse and dangerous than today's European fauna. This was a time when the mighty aurochs still roamed the earth. Now, these things are fucking terrifying, okay?
I think they're beautiful, though.
They're
I would want to
gorgeous, but they're
ride one.
terrifying.
I see. This is Brandon's bad danger sense. Brandon wants to go pet it and go ride it. I just want to go on a magical ride, like clinging to its back. Not like a horse, but like just like hugging it, and then
Totally.
I would die for sure.
You would absolutely die. Oh my god. So these were the now extinct wild ancestor of modern cattle, characterized by huge forward curving horns, powerful builds, and distinct coloring. Black bulls with white spinal stripes and reddish brown cows. Standing up to 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing a ton. These strong, dangerous bovines roamed Eurasia and North Africa, living in herds.
I want to give it a hug even more. I don't know why. It's like, it's so big. He's 6 feet tall to the shoulder. That means we're like eye level. I'd be like,
baby, no.
Hi, buddy. Let me pet you. I just want a hug.
No.
So cute.
Brandon, I love you, but no. Brandon,
I also want
get
to
away
pet the lion.
from the danger cow.
I want the danger kitties and the danger cows.
No.
Let me pet that cow.
I'm gonna pet that dog. Can I pet that dog? Fuck. But yes, they lived in herds and adapting to diverse environments before human hunting and habitat loss led to their extinction in 1627. So these guys have not been gone long, okay?
I know. I could have given them a hug.
And here's the thing. As a Southern girl, okay? Hi. Texas. What are we known for? Fucking cows. Okay.
I was gonna say misogyny and bigotry, but that too.
Indeed. Misogyny and bigotry is why I left. But, in
Just
the South.
want to give that
In the
cow a
South.
hug.
Did you know that cows are more dangerous than cars?
That's okay.
Like, the cows will fucking kill you. They have not forgotten where they came from. Just like chickens have not forgotten that they are descendants of the fucking dinosaurs, okay?
Oh, chickens
are terrifying.
Scare. Chickens scare me more. But the cow, the big old cow, just...
No.
It seems so boring.
They're fun, okay? They are fun and they are sweet until they are not.
I know.
I had a cow. Funny enough, we named it Bessie because, as you do. And the cow would play like the dogs. And it was amazing and I loved it. But at the same time, she played like the dogs. Imagine as she kept growing. I knew her as a calf where she wasn't necessarily full grown. She wasn't tiny, no more. But like, as she was growing, if she continued to play like the dogs, that could have been very, very dangerous because they don't understand their size.
And my brain went to a lap oryx, and like, what a fabulous way to go. It's like those big dogs that don't know they're a lap dog, but it's an oryx. And just,
Yes.
And I died. All my organs came out of me like a toothpaste. But like,
I died. There go my organs. Fuck.
Dead.
Oh my god. But there is a long history of interaction between hominins and aurochs, with evidence of butchery by Neanderthals and extensive depiction in Upper Paleolithic cave paintings, such as those at Lascaux and Chauvet caves in France. That cough took a lot more out of me than I thought it did. Oh god. So aurochs were independently domesticated in at least two separate events. The Taurine cattle, Bos taurus, in the Fertile Crescent of the Near East around 10,500 years ago, and Zebu cattle, Bos indicus, in the Indus Valley around 9,000 years ago. This process was central to the development of agriculture and human civilization. The animal itself symbolized power, strength, and sexual potency in various ancient cultures. It is depicted on Babylon's Ishtar Gate and mentioned in the Nibelungenlied and Julius Caesar's Commentary de Bello Gallico. Their large horns were often used as hunting trophies or drinking horns. Mighty elk would have also been seen wandering the forest. So large members of the deer family, known for their impressive antlers on males and the dark, shaggy neck manes and prominent light-colored rump patches, with coats changing from reddish-brown in summer to tan-gray in the winter. They have very thick bodies, slender legs, and stand about 4.5 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder, with the males weighing significantly more and vocalizing with loud bugles, especially during mating season. Calves are born spotted for camouflage and lose spots by summer's end. So, Roman writers mistakenly believed that they had no joints in their legs and had to sleep leaning against trees. You know what? I forgive some ignorance, because when you're looking at something like that and you're just like, that's big, I'm going to stay over here.
But also kind of proves that these Roman writers were definitely aristocracy, because I feel like if you're hunting this damn thing, you damn well know it's got joints in its legs, like,
because you're
look at the way
watching
they
it
leap.
run.
Yeah, like the way they leap and run, like, duh. But like these dumbass. Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, duh, yeah. So, however, there were still some of the most wild places on Earth at this time. The forests were thick with gray wolves, brown bears, and Eurasian lynx, which made travel between settlements incredibly hazardous. So, Romans, whose records are, unfortunately, some of the only primary sources we have, describe the climate as bitter. And it was indeed generally colder and wetter than today. The winters were long, with rivers like the Rhine freezing thick enough to support the weight of entire armies crossing on foot. Summer, on the other hand, was short and prone to violent thunderstorms that turned the dirt tracks into impassable mires.
Yay, more quicksand.
Woohoo!
So, but so and like that, like right there, like that kind of proves right what we're working with here and what we mean by that bias, right? Because they're just in one word, the climate is bitter. Okay. I mean, it can be, but like it's also beautiful and things like that. And like I could understand words like harsh and things like that, but this is already the big, just in that one word, just talking about climate, othering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to get into it, but like there's a lot of these connotations, right, of racism and you stuff from the Romans about like Thracians, Gauls, Germans, right? Like that those people are better in the cold. Like that they're dumb, but they're physically hardier than the Romans, right? And they don't mean it in a way that's very praiseworthy. It's like they're animals, right? Like, well, they can handle these cold temperatures because they're like animals, right?
They're
And
not civilized.
that's why you want them on your plantation because they're just better in those climates.
They can
If it
handle the
sounds
hard labor.
familiar, if it sounds familiar, let us know.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
This is the same kind of stuff that was being used to why enslaving African Americans was okay, right? That they were subhuman, that they were from these harsh, quote unquote, harsh climates. Therefore, they should be like this is way better than those climates. So they just gotta be thriving out there. Like yikes. So like it's tale is old as time. It's like, but it's ironic that those same people that were treated this way by the Romans would go on to treat other people like that. It's unfortunately sad and vicious.
It is, and hurt people, and unfortunately, you
Yeah.
have to be the one to break the cycle versus allowing it
Mm-hmm.
to continue.
Yep. And there were people back then who thought those things were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, you know, whole and not just like a couple, like whole communities of people. Whether you're talking about, for example, like the Quakers and stuff like that, were kind of one of the big notorious groups. Asterisks because I'm sure there were bad people amongst them too, but like where they were really, abolitionist against slavery, right? And then you go all the way back to even Roman stuff where people would go to these latifundia and go like, these are fucked up places that no one deserves to be at. You know, but the rich out their voices outweighed it and also censorship, right? So we might get someone who got to get through the lines, but we don't know if that was just like a minority opinion or if that maybe there were a lot of people who thought that. Who knows? But so to understand ancient Germania, railing that back in, we have to refrain from imagining it as a country or even as a unified people. Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
Which has made this research difficult. Um, Instead, we should try to think of it as more of a shifting patchwork, right, of warrior cultures. Because I ended up having to look that up too, right? And I know there's a difference, but it's like, okay, like how would we, in simple terms, kind of explain this, right? Like Gaul versus Germania. I mean, other than maybe like language, right? And because both are warrior cultures and stuff like that, but like in the German context, they're definitely lean more into this like warrior honor culture more. Not that the Gauls didn't, not that the Celts didn't, because they notoriously did too. But we'll get into it, right? So There was no central government. Instead, there were dozens and dozens, hundreds even, of independent tribes that often hated each other as much as they hated Rome. Blood feuds, you know?
All of the
Before
blood feuds.
all of the blood feuds. There's whole legal systems around that. Before Roman contact, the region of Germania was home to a diverse tribal groups, as we said, with Iron Age cultures like that of the Jastorf culture that emerged from Celtic dominance around 600 BCE, migrating from Scandinavia and developing distinct Germanic languages, engaging in agriculture, metalworking, and trade, existing as independent clans and tribes with varied social structures, interacting through warfare, alliances, and trade with Celts and later Romans. The emergence of the Germanic peoples was a slow motion transformation that began in the mist-shrouded regions of Scandinavia and the Baltic coast. From around 1000 BCE, a significant shift in North American climate known as the sub-Atlantic period brought colder and wetter weather to Northern Europe. This environmental pressure acted as a catalyst, forming diverse tribes of the Nordic Bronze Age to look southward toward more temperate lands held at that point by Celtic groups. This wasn't a singular organized invasion, but rather a multi-century drift of families and clans following river valleys, gradually displacing or absorbing the existing populations until it was in what we now call northern Germany and Poland, roughly. By the 6th century BCE, there's evidence that this cultural evolution reached a milestone known to archaeologists as the Jastorf culture. This period represents the quote-unquote birth of a newer, more distinctly Germanic identity. Again, I am tiptoeing around this because, people sometimes like to take this too far, right? But there is, at this point, a uniquely cultural identity, separate from these Nordic Bronze Age cultures, separate from the Celtic, again, that's a monolith too, but these Gallic Celtic peoples, right? Forming this new identity, something we could perhaps identify as a quote-unquote Germanic culture, right? Unlike the flamboyant and wealthy Celtic Hellstat culture to the south, the Jastorf people were more egalitarian based off of some of the archaeological evidence. Seems to be, I don't like saying anything definite because we don't have writing. And it would appear more austere in their material remains, right? It's hard to get a picture right just by a couple graves. Just, was it because it was a choice? Was it because of technology? Was it because we're not finding the more rich graves? But based off what we know, it does look like that they may have been a more austere culture, right? Mm-hmm. They are usually identified by their urn field burials, where dead were cremated and their ashes placed in simple, dark, burnished ceramic vessels. This era also marks the definitive linguistic split of the first Germanic consonant shift. It's a lot of words. As these barbarian tribes became more isolated from their Indo-European cousins, their language transformed. Sounds like P shifted to F and T shifted to the or TH here in, with the English alphabet, creating the phonetic foundation of future Germanic languages, including English.
Yep.
As these groups pushed farther into Central Europe, they, of course, encountered Celts, which we could argue they already had, but whatever. These Celts, who were then the masters of ironworking and urban fortification, their relationship between the two was complex spectrum of conflict and mimicry, right? Like most societies in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Greeks do it, the Romans do it, right?
They all do it.
Right. So the Germanic tribes were heavily, quote unquote, Celtic-sized, right, during this period. So adopting the word king, reek, and iron, Isarn, from their neighbors. And it's spelled reek, not Reich yet. Throwing that
Yeek.
out there.
Yeek.
But I know we have to be careful.
We have to be
Careful.
very careful.
Mm-hmm. And Reich is and still is a word, okay, but it has a lot of undertones now.
Indeed.
So, in many regions, the border between a German and a Celt burial was sorry. In many regions, the border between German and Celt settlements was blurry. Tribes lived in hybrid zones where they might speak a Germanic dialect, but wear Celtic style jewelry and use Celtic farming techniques, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think this is most beautiful example of why we can't put people in boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Romans, and we have the Romans and Greeks to thank for that. They really loved their lists and categories, right? Everything needs to fit neatly. But even words like Romano-British prove that's not true, right? And that's macro. On a micro, one community might be more one way than another, and another might have both of those things plus this third thing. Because you know what? People have been moving and migrating, and there's been communities as long as people can remember, right? That's why I
Mm-hmm.
hate the word melting pot, because it's like, okay, you act like we're unique, but we're not. Melting pots, quote unquote, have existed everywhere, right? And
Absolutely.
especially like these ideas of hard borders is a modern concept that evolved with nationalism at the end of the 18th century and early 19th century. Until then, borders were usually shades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially the further back you go, right? Um,
Because it didn't matter.
usually, it's
It's all
right.
pretend.
Yeah. And like there's a point where like there's so especially with these communities, they're so vastly far away from each other, right? Like there's a lot of this no man's land in between, right? So it's like I'm sure there was overlap. And then there or overlap, they were so far apart that you wouldn't even have borders so much as like these strips where it's like, I don't know, no one lives there.
Pretty much.
Like so you're going to have these like shifts, right? And so that's why like we sometimes have trouble of like I think visually like okay, when I see pictures of quote unquote ancient Germans and ancient Celts, they kind of look the same. They kind of did. They have similar needs, they got similar ideas from each other. They multiple times come together and separate and come back together, as we're already seeing. So it's a more complex history, and that's why it's almost more accurate to try and go tribe by tribe rather than try and make these one big monolith. But we have to speak generally, unfortunately, due to the nature of this podcast. So,
Yes.
but that's why I'm telling you this, because this is just to keep you in mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have some things that we can use as like generally speaking, but there's always exceptions to the rule. Anyway, so these hybrid zones where they might speak a German dialect, like I was saying, but wear Celtic jewelry and we're using Celtic farming techniques, they eventually, the more decentralized and aggressive Germanic culture, social culture, my God, I cannot talk. Eventually, the more decentralized and aggressive Germanic social structure began to wear down on the Celtic oppida, or fortified towns, leading to a gradual Germanic dominance over the heartland of Europe. And I would say that's another little cultural difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were small non-walled communities in Celtic and Gallic lands for sure. However, that is a big marker, right? Through
Indeed.
whether you're talking about the Britannia, all the peoples of Britain, or the Gauli or wherever, or like peoples of France and Belgium, right, where these different Celtic cultures live, there was this, and we saw it with Vercingetorix, is this like hill fort, the, oppida of fortified towns, right? Meaning that there's still a central hub. They're not, and that's not to say that the Germans were necessarily like, how do I put this, nomadic, but they were less rooted, right? Whether that's because of separation of distance where you didn't need to wall your towns, or because there was this idea of like, okay, we kind of shift between towns and things like that. Kind of like the Ultimate, like, Pocahontas people did, right? Where they had like essentially multiple towns that they might seasonally shift to, right? Depending on the time of year. I don't know. I'm not that expert. I'm just saying like there's other ways to live.
Yes.
Like the in-between essentially of nomadic and fully settled, right? But when you're not bound to these fort towns, right? And they're horse lords on top of that, like that's something the Germans are very well known for, aka Odin and Sleipnir. They are very horse bros, so they have better tactics to hit and run, right? Of raid and things like that versus the Gauls
and
aren't necessarily really
so tiny. So everyone's imagining these like huge horses. They're like ponies. They're so small.
Well, I would say that's true for the Gauls. For the Germanic people, they're not Arabian beautiful slender horses. These,
no, God no.
They are bulky. I would not mess around with them either. Because they are known for being fierce, war horses. Maybe not quite to the same level as today would have been, but like definitely not just ponies. You know what I'm saying?
No. I'm saying pony. I'm okay.
Yeah.
For reference.
No, I know what you mean.
For reference.
No, I know. I was going to say, I know what you mean because, yes, in Gaul, yes. That is what they were. They were large ponies. And it's just like really cute. But
no,
these
they
German
did get
people,
fiercer. They did get fiercer as they went north.
To keep in mind.
Always. Okay, we went on a tangent. Tangent over. Okay, so the social fabric of these early people was woven around the Sipi, or the extended kin group. Your identity was entirely dependent on your bloodline. If you were outside of a clan, you were legally non-existent. Over time, this evolved into a more martial hierarchy known as the comitatus, or comitatus. This is described as a sacred bond between a chieftain and his hearth companions, warriors who swore to outdo their leader in bravery. This would be the basis of the much later Anglo-Saxon concept of the hearth wereod. Decisions for the wider tribe were made at meetings called literally the Thing, a massive open-air assembly. Here, the power of a leader was checked by the collective will of free men who would signify their vote by the rattling of weapons, a tradition that emphasized the warrior-centric nature of their democracy. Now, daily life was anchored to the longhouse, a massive timber structure that served as a microcosm of their world. These houses were often 30 meters long, with one end serving as the family's living quarters and the other as a stable for livestock. This design was a brilliant adaptation to the freezing climate, as the body heat of the cattle helped keep the humans warm during the long winters.
And I would also say, just like, also from the standpoint of raiding, right?
Because it protected your cattle from being stolen.
Well, it's a lot harder, right? To raid your cattle if they're literally with you, right? Versus like a barn, separate from your house or further away from your house, right? People could sneak in, and then by the time you find out, they're either on their way or whatever. Versus like they have to, if they want your cattle, they're gonna have to kill you. They're gonna have to come in your house and get you. And it's just a lot less tempting if I were to think. So it is multiple parts. It's just something I thought of, like, that's
No.
interesting, right? Yeah,
And
that the smell
that's
going
wise.
on in there. Oh
The smell
God.
would be terrible. The
Mm.
smell would be fucking horrific.
Also, it's kind of like being right next to your fridge. Like, hey, I'm thinking steak snake. Cool. Mhm. Yikes.
Okay, that's hilarious. So, economically, they were sophisticated farmers who understood the value of manure and crop rotation. They grew a variety of hardy grains like emmer wheat, spelt, and rye, which could survive the damp soil better than Mediterranean crops. They also pioneered bog iron harvesting, extracting iron ore from wetlands to create tools and weapons that would eventually challenge Rome. So, trade and warfare were two sides of the same coin in ancient Germania. The most famous trade artery was the Amber Road, which funneled northern gold from the Baltic Sea down to the Mediterranean. In exchange for this fossilized resin, the tribes received luxury goods like wine, bronze mirrors, and Roman coins, which were often used as jewelry rather than currency. Warfare, meanwhile, was often a ritualistic affair. Many tribes practiced bog sacrifices, where the armor and weapons of a defeated enemy were meticulously broken and cast into sacred lakes as a gift to the gods. This suggests that for the early Germans, the landscape itself was haunted by the divine, and every battle was a spiritual transaction as much as a territorial one.
And there is some overlap here with some of like the Celtic cultures and the Gauls, right? Based off Roman writings and what we're finding in archaeology. So those big horns that the Celts are known for, right? Like those
Yes.
big war horns. There's only a handful of examples in the world. Only like one that's honestly pretty whole, and all of them were broken or smashed to a point of disrepair, right? And put into these like bogs. So it's interesting, like this is a little bit of that crossover. And also I would love at some point to maybe do a Patreon episode about the history of like amber, because that seems fascinating.
Yes.
I love amber, it's beautiful, but the ancients had a lot of ideas because of its properties. So I feel like that'd be kind of a fun one to do. Like there was a reason people were buying this stuff from them. So let's speaking of Rome and their coins and the trade, I think we've gotten to the point it's time to talk about them, right?
Ew.
So I know, because they're like a parasite and they're everywhere.
They don't die.
The relationship between the Roman Empire and the tribes of Germania was defined by a profound cultural misunderstanding that lasted for over 5 centuries. For the Romans, the Rhine was not just a river. To them, it was a psychological threshold between the civilized, quote, world of stone and law, and a, quote, barbaric world of shadow and chaos. Ugh,
Ooh, their boundaries. I'm going to
God.
put you in a box.
The first true shock to the Roman system came in the late 2nd century BCE with the Cimbrian War, when hundreds of thousands of migrating Cimbri and Teutones descended from the Jutland Peninsula. They annihilated several Roman armies, bringing a terror to Italy that hadn't been felt since the days of Hannibal. It was only through the radical military reforms of a certain Gaius Marius, and
Mm.
we know how he is, that the Republic survived. Not for long, but the encounter left an indelible scar on Roman psyche. The Northern Peril was no longer a myth, but a demographic reality. Decades later, a certain Julius Caesar, because he has to also find his way in every goddamn series,
This fucker.
Hopefully in season 3, when we're talking about Japan, spoiler, I'm hoping he doesn't find his way there.
He
Well,
shouldn't. I see
he
no
shouldn't,
reason why he should.
but I'm sure he'll surprise us.
Oh God.
Oh God. But Julius Caesar used this lingering fear, of course he did, to justify his bloody annexation of Gaul. Because isn't that funny? Because they also just go like they're the same thing. like, uh,
Yep.
to Caesar, the Rhine was the ultimate frontier, and he famously demonstrated Roman dominance by building a massive dominance,
Dominance. I don't
aka
know
colon,
why.
aka colonization and imperialism. And how do you do that? That's right, building crap on someone else's land. So he started by building a massive timber bridge across the river in just 10 days. This was a feat of psychological warfare. He didn't cross to conquer, but to show that the Roman engineers could conquer that environment the Germanic tribes relied on for protection. He marched across casually, burned a few villages, as you do, to make a point, just, as you do, and then dismantled the bridge behind him, effectively telling the tribes that the Rhine was the only barrier for them, but not for Rome. And he's back. Under the first emperor, Augustus, aka Octavian, aka that twerp,
That little twerp.
the strategy shifted from mere deterrence to total provincial absorption because it's Octavian.
Yeah.
The goal was to move the Roman border from the Rhine all the way to the Elbe River, essentially turning the heart of Germania into a Roman province. This task was spearheaded by the emperor's stepsons, Drusus and Tiberius. Drusus was described as a visionary commander who understood that Germania could only be conquered through its waterways. He set about to have a massive canal, the Fossa Drusiana, because of course he named after himself, dug to connect the Rhine to the North Sea, allowing the Roman fleet to bypass the dangerous coastal waters and strike deep into the interior via the Ems and Weser rivers.
So, for a brief moment in history, it looked as though Germania would become as Roman as Spain or Gaul. With military camps like Valdergerms already beginning to transition into stone-built Roman towns complete with forums and temples.
That's
This
right, because they did this crap in Britain too. Like,
Yes, they
it's why
did.
Boudica got big mad. That and they scourged her and raped her literal children, like babies. Like
We will get
they weren't
there. We will get there.
teenagers. I know, but but this is where they start. They're like, hey, we're just building a little trade. Don't worry about it, or a little fort. Don't worry about it. And then they put up walls and stones. They go, hey, everybody, move on in. Oh, and also you can have all the land around it because
Sounds very
colonialism.
American with all of the army bases. What?
Also, I mean, who do you think we emulate, babes?
Oh, I know, because Rome never actually fell. It just changed
Mm-hmm.
hands. But this dream of a greater Germania was shattered in 9 CE by a single man, Arminius, a prince of the Cherusi tribe. Arminius had been raised in Rome as a hostage, served in the Roman military, and even attained the rank of equestrian, the earliest incarnation of the knight. A man named Publius Quintilius Varus, and 3 entire legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, into the boggy, restricted terrain of the Teutoburg Forest. Over 3 days of rain-soaked slaughter, the Roman army was systematically destroyed. Roman casualties have been estimated at about 15,000 to 20,000 dead. and many of the officers were said to have taken their own lives by falling on their swords in the approved manner. Tacitus wrote that many officers were sacrificed by the Germanic forces as part of their indigenous religious ceremonies, cooked in pots and their bones used for rituals. Others were ransomed, and some common soldiers appeared to have been enslaved. So Tacitus, fuck Tacitus, okay?
But
Fuck this
also,
guy.
here's the thing: Tacitus is weird because, like, on some things, now, like Dio, he loves the drama. He loves, talking he likes the gory crap. Tacitus is a little more, he's military man. He's a little bit more to the point, and he's got his own spin. Don't get me wrong, his own view. But like, he doesn't come off as super dishonest. That being said, does he necessarily understand what's happening? No, but like, we're going to get into it. You're going to see that maybe he's not entirely wrong. He's kind of Herodotus in that way. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, maybe.
but cooked in pots and
But
their bones
Tacitus,
used for rituals.
yeah.
I mean, yes, using the bones of your enemies as a practicing witch, I can see it. Okay.
The problem is there is archaeology, and it kind of shows that.
Yeah.
So is it talked up for dramatic effect? Maybe, but if it is, it's still not honestly that far from the truth.
No, and yeah.
And like the thing is like he says cooked in pots. He doesn't say that they ate them or anything, right? That would be definitely othering for sure. But if you're trying to get to the bones,
you have to cook the meat off.
The fastest way, yeah. So, I mean, I
don't know. And here's the thing. Technically, you can cook them and then feed the meat to the bog. Feed the meat to the old gods.
Yeah.
Do it that way.
Yeah, and that's the thing is we just don't have the other side of this, right? To like verify it, or even if it did verify it, like the context, like that's what we're really losing. I don't think that he's necessarily a liar, pants on fire. But I think he's understanding it through the lens of a Roman dude.
As best as he can. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the defeat was so total that the 3 lost legionary numbers were never used again in Roman history.
And you're about to like this next part, guys. You're about to like this next part. I know Courtney would.
Absolutely. I'm going to say it so cheerfully. When news reached Rome, Augustus, this fucker, reportedly spent months wandering his palace, hitting his head against walls and wailing, "Varus, give me back my legions!" Fucker.
I love he crashed out. I love it. Because he's known for being, he's always in control of his emotions. And this broke him. There's a lot going on, but like this really broke him. He finally had a limit. And yeah, I think he crashed out.
Absolutely.
And I love that.
I do too. So Teutoburg Forest is still considered one of the most important defeats in Roman history, bringing the triumphant period of expansion under Augustus to an abrupt end. It dissuaded the Romans from pursuing the conquest of Germania, and so can be considered one of the most important events in European history. So imagine the other side of it. If Rome had won, it would be even more Romanized than it was. And that is a scary thing to think about.
And this is that, Nazi asterisk coming here again, right? Some people like to use this as evidence of superiority.
No.
And it's not, okay? Because, and we're going to see why, right? Like, you can't point to one thing and go, okay, that means we're better than them. Like, there's so much history back and forth. Is it do I find it very important? Yes, because like you said, if they were been successful, who knows how far they could have gone. But like, I think there was just going to be a natural border, right?
There had to be.
Like, the thing about Gaul and stuff was like, these were people who had been, the way Julius Caesar describes it and how like my history class kind of described it, made it sound like they were these wild peoples, and they really weren't. They were very diverse, and we're getting more of that now, but like they were pretty, they had a lot of contact with Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans for centuries,
Mhm.
right? So like there are whole towns, right, that were like Marseille was kind of this very unique culture where it was like this hybrid of Phoenician, Gaelic, and Roman all in one, right? So you have to imagine they did a lot of trade. You have hill fort towns. There's roads connecting all that,
Mhm.
right? So like the Romans could at least navigate roads. They quote unquote improved the roads from that point, but like they had at least roads. That's not what's happening in Germania. Like that's why they were scared shitless, because they can't keep formation. They don't have roads that can get supplies easy in and out, or where they can back in and out from. They were all super confident because those roads led up to the Rhine, and then whoopsie daisy, once you get past the Rhine, which you thought was this is your only geographic stronghold. Yeah. Good luck getting through the forest. We'll be waiting for you.
We'll be waiting for you.
And then we're gonna cook you and take your bones. So,
I mean, drinking wine out of the skull of my enemy. I will do it every time. Every time. So, the victory was followed by a clean sweep of all Roman forts, garrisons, and cities, of which there were at least 2 east of the Rhine. The 2 Roman legions remaining in Germania, commanded by Varus's nephew Lucius Nonius Asprenas, simply tried to hold the Rhine. One fort, Aliso, most likely located in today's Halterramsee, fended off the Germanic alliance for many weeks, perhaps even a few months. After the situation became untenable, the garrison under Lucius Caduceus, accompanied by survivors of Teutoburg Forest, broke through the siege and reached the Rhine. They had resisted long enough for Nonius Asprenas to have organized the Roman defense on the Rhine with 2 legions, and Tiberius to have arrived with a new army, together preventing Arminius from crossing the Rhine and invading Gaul.
which this was surprising. Like, I think we all know Tiberius for his late stage, right? The Epstein Island one.
Indeed. That.
But he wasn't always that man. And I did not. He always, even in my readings and like what I knew about him and stuff, right, always came off as more bureaucratic. Like I did not know he had a military career like that. And honestly, even if it's as a relief force, that's pretty impressive. He's going into territory that made good old Octavian smash his head against the wall and cry.
Like a little bitch boy
so
he is.
It's pretty serial. So, I mean, like, even if it's, and I know this is probably because of the Roman propaganda, he's not going in as a conqueror, but as relief and saving people, I still find that honestly really impressive.
It is.
But whatever.
Like,
doesn't
don't
mean
get
he
me
should
wrong.
be
It is. I'm just rooting for the other side. Like,
I am too. But we have to remember they go in, and if it's anything like Boudica, right? They're killing everyone.
Oh yes.
Germans, Romans, Romanic Germans, Gauls, anyone who was unfortunately there, right? And many of them were invited. These are people like you and me. Like maybe there's a Roman person there who was told, an everyday person whose life sucked in Rome, and they were given this opportunity to, like, it's far away, but like I could start a new life and actually make something of myself. Like, these are people, so many people who didn't have a say, weren't the ones, actively, they may have been a tool of colonialism, but they probably didn't know it, like they're not thinking macro like that. And it's not the people, like, it's not Augustus who's getting punished, right? It's not Augustus in a pot becoming human chili. It's some poor guy who was because they're conscripted, they're drafted, probably didn't even want to be there, got nothing out of it really. And even if he gets paid, it's not like he had choice. you know, um, and he's the one in the human chili, you know. So I agree. But also, it's not that the Germans are this like, you know, coming in. They're like, hey, we're not going to kill anybody. We're just after that. No, no, you need to get rid of the colonizer, burn it,
Yep.
all of it, gone. And
Sounds
I
like a
get
template.
why, but no one's a hero here.
No, and you can't be a hero if you are leading a revolution. You cannot be a hero if you are
Mm-hmm.
ridding yourself of an infection.
Right.
Here's the thing.
Unfortunately,
In
the
medicine.
infection is also children, women, the
Yes.
old, people who
Yes.
don't have a choice. And it's sad. It was more of my point of just saying, like, hey, because there's people who glorify all of these things, right? Both sides of it.
Absolutely. And
Neither
there
side
will
should be
be.
glorified. I'm, and I, the big bad is definitely Rome. Okay. Like the Roman aristocracy, Augustus, of course. They are less bad than the people who are just trying to keep hold of their lands and then like their culture and shit, for
Of
sure.
course.
Um, but like, you know, it's nothing is sanitary, right? And I think that's the point we here make, and that's
Yep.
why it's important to talk about this, because it's a narrative that people to this day still try to use.
And it's destructive and it shouldn't be used that way. Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
do agree.
Whether we're a civilizing force that comes in, and that how dare they lash out when they were dirty people and we brought them water and baths and heated floors, um, for the rich Roman people, but don't worry about it, because that's something that happens today, right?
Of
And
course.
or the flip side of it being like, we're just defending our lands, and yes, we absolutely raped and killed children because fuck them. And you're like, oh, I mean, it's both, right? I mean, I would definitely, or like that, it proves that we are superior racially or whatever.
Yeah, no,
Either way,
all of the ways are bad. Okay?
right?
All of the ways are bad. And
Yes,
there's always going to be rotten apples in the bunch.
for
Okay?
sure. So,
There's always going to be rotten apples in the bunch. So glorifying any of it is
mm-hmm,
stupid. Stop
for
it.
sure. So, back to the narrative. The disaster because we can agree it was that,
Indeed.
at Pittsburgh Forest had left yet another jagged wound on the Roman psyche, because if they hadn't already had one, they definitely do now. But Rome was a creature of long memory and methodical spite. So was Augustus. so, but in 14 AD, following the death of Augustus,
Ding
the
dong, the witch is dead.
yeah, well, just to have his jaded pedo heir. Anyway,
Mm.
the task of suturing the wound fell to a man named Germanicus. He was a young, charismatic commander with a point to prove and an army on the verge of mutiny. And he's glorified quite a bit
Indeed.
because he's apparently super hot and he loves his wife, which is cool, I guess, you know, not given.
I mean,
Loves kids. And
yeah.
something he does as a hobby is some light genocide.
Oh,
I know you want to root for
no.
somebody, but no, no.
No.
So it's just like, you're like, man, you almost made it. You're like, you're hot, you're super cool, you like your wife and treat her well, and you treat women well, and you treat your kids good, and you're super cool, and then genocide. Damn it. Um, but Germanicus did not wait for a formal invitation to war. He launched a series, much like Caesar. He launched a series of shock and awe raids, starting with a surprise night attack on the Marsi. While the Germanic tribes managed to scramble and ambush as the Romans retreated to winter quarters, the legions held. For the first time in years, the Roman eagle didn't falter in the German woods. It bit back. By
Oh,
15 AD, the campaign turned into a full-scale invasion. Germanicus led an immense force, supposedly nearly 70,000 men, supported by a massive naval fleet, which naval is in river fleet. Just throwing that out there. Worked a little different. But it also shows how big these rivers and stuff are. They razed the capital of the Chatti and, in a significant psychological blow, captured Thusnelda, the wife of the rebel leader of Arminius. But the most haunting moment of the campaign occurred when the army marched into the heart of Teutoburg Forest. There, they found the site of the original massacre. The scene was frozen in time. Heaps of bleached bones, shattered barricades, and Roman skulls nailed to trees. It was a somber, silent ritual. The soldiers buried the remains of their fallen brothers, treating the dead as their own kin. But this wasn't just a funeral. It was a refueling of Roman rage. The war reached its fever pitch in 16 AD. Arminius, up until this point, brilliant tactician who had lured Varus into that whole thing, finally found himself forced into the one thing he feared, an open field battle, because he is Roman. Remember that. He knows their strategies. He's screwed if they get into an open field conflict, right? Because he's leading these German warrior tribes, right? And it's all about individual heroism, right? Versus working together as a unit. It's what screwed Boudica over, and it's what screwed Vercingetorix over. He knows this. Boudica hasn't happened yet, but he knows this about his own people, right? And he knows the Romans because he was stuck there. So he's been really trying to avoid that, but unfortunately, his hand's forced. At Edista Viso and the Angravarian Wall, the two worlds collided. This time, the dense forests did not save the Germanic coalition. The disciplined Roman lines turned the plains into a slaughterhouse, inflicting massive casualties and sending the survivors fleeing towards the Elbe. By the end of the summer, Germanicus had achieved the impossible. He had recovered 2 of the 3 lost eagle standards, the holy grails of Roman military honor. It was bad if you lost an eagle, dude. Bad. But just as Germanicus was poised to finish the job and potentially, again, annex all of Germania, an order came from Rome. Return home. Emperor Tiberius, perhaps wary of his nephew's soaring popularity, or perhaps simply a cold-eyed accountant of war, decided that the cost wasn't worth the gain. The forests were too deep, supply lines too long, and the people there too fiercely independent to be worth the silver it would take to govern them. Germanicus returned to a hero's triumph, but the, quote, conquest of Germania ended there. Rome shifted to a policy of divide and conquer, as many colonial powers do, using diplomacy and bribes rather than blades. And the thing about Tiberius is he's kind of known in this story as being like, he was just jealous, right? And that's why he called Germanicus back. And maybe from a political standpoint, maybe, but like also, this is a great other point, right? It's one thing to go in there and like, I guess, revenge killing, but what's the long-term strategy here? How are you going to hold it? Like,
no, and that's valid. If these people are fighting this much,
yeah, and it's not like Gaul where you have essentially these oppida like ready for you to like kind of take over. You know, like this. You don't have the roads. You don't have that. You don't have the infrastructure. It's going to take years for you to build that infrastructure. The supply chains are too long. Like, it's just untenable. It's what happened with Alexander the Great. He just kept on conquering because he honestly didn't have an end game plan. He didn't know what to do. He's like, I just keep going, keep going, keep going. And then eventually it's all going to fall apart because it's not tenable for long term. And why do that when you can just get all of the benefits, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but without any of the cost? I mean, it's pragmatic for sure.
Absolutely. So the story closed with two final poetic notes. In 50 AD, a Roman patrol happened upon a group of Germanic raiders and found something incredible. A handful of elderly Roman soldiers, survivors of Varus's original defeat, who had been held as slaves for 40 years. They were finally brought home. As for Arminius, the man who had united the tribes, unfortunately, he met the fate of many revolutionaries who dared to stand up to Rome. In 21 AD, he died after his own family poisoned him. In the aftermath of Teutoburg and the subsequent war of Roman retaliation, the Romans abandoned the Elbe. Elbe?
Elbe, yeah.
Yeah, okay. The Romans abandoned the Elbe and retreated to the Rhine, effectively splitting the Germanic world in two. Well, we've had that in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
They established two heavily militarized provinces on the western bank. Germania Superior, centered around the Mains, and Germania Inferior, centered around Cologne, to manage the free Germans on the other side. They constructed the Limes Germanicus, a 568-kilometer system of watchtowers, palisades, and earthen ramparts.
It's kind of like the first Berlin Wall.
Indeed, that's exactly what I was thinking. Now, this was not a solid wall, more like the more famous one in Britain's Hadrian's Wall, but rather more of a sophisticated custom border designed to control the flow of people and trade.
Kind of like the Berlin Wall. Like
Kind
a,
of like the Berlin Wall. Roman merchants regularly crossed the Limes to trade wine, silver, and glass for Germanic slaves, rare amber, and cattle, creating a frontier economy where the tribes closest to the border became wealthy, Romanized, and increasingly reliant on imperial politics.
which is kind of like what had happened to the Gauls all those years ago. Like, so it's like, okay, instead of fighting and forcing it on them, it's a slow conquest, in a way.
It's a conquest of the mind.
Yeah. I
Well,
mean, and it's
mind
like,
and
sure, they
money.
don't ever truly own them, but you also, it secures your border because like the people right on it aren't going to threaten you. And it's a bleeding effect. And then we were talking about these cultures, like it's all bleeding effects, right? And we're showing
Mm-hmm.
bleeding one way where the Germans become Romanized, but I'm sure there were Romans becoming Germanized on the other end of it. Like it goes back and forth, right?
It does.
Um,
This is how culture shifts over time.
yeah.
This is the natural ebb and flow of people. Now, is this also being manipulated by Rome?
Mhm.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Yeah, and like in that statement, for example, like the Romans say, like, oh, they slowly get Romanized on the other side of the wall. Sure, you're failing to mention how you guys are on the other side of the wall are also slowly getting Germanized, right? And to a degree, it might not be at the same rate because as a conquering peoples, a lot of times you're not going to take the time to learn a culture you feel is inferior to you. But I can tell you right now, they probably picked up a lot of different techniques when it comes to architecture or agriculture or whatever, because you have to survive in that environment. There you might pick up on stories. You marry into families whose mothers tell you stories and things like that. I mean, it's just going to happen. And they might go, I'm Roman. And then God forbid they ever went to Rome. They realize, oh shit, I'm nothing like these people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so like, it's interesting. Um, but, and like, but at the same time, just because you are rich and make a lot of trade and use money, Does that make you Romanized? Maybe. I don't know. So, anyway, by the 2nd century CE, the border had stabilized into a tense but profitable stalemate. The Romans shifted from conquest to management, using a complex web of subsidies and client kings to keep the tribes from fighting each other rather than the empire. So, like, have them fight each other. Don't look at what's going on over here, South America.
Yep.
However, Africa, this policy inadvertently created the very threat the Middle East. Sorry, I keep got a little something in my throat. However, this policy inadvertently created the very threat it sought to prevent. Because of course it did.
Mm-hmm.
By funneling wealth and military training to these allies, the Romans helped the small, fragmented clans evolve into massive tribal confederations like the Alemanni and the Franks. These super tribes were no longer content with raiding. They had learned the Roman way of war and were beginning to look at the Rhine not as a border to be respected, but as a gate to be broken, throw off the shackles of the imperial oppressor. Why do we keep letting you exploit our land and our people and telling us how we can or cannot do things? Wait a minute. We own this. We are the ancestral peoples of this land.
Yep. Because revolution is always inevitable whenever oppression is present.
And to be fair, again, just, I'm going to use the example of like what happened with the Middle East, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Iran. I am not okay with Iran's government. I don't like how they treat people, but that government formed from our actions.
Yes.
So, very complex history that I just try to condense into a micro thing, and people could probably get upset. But if you look at the history, the British were colonizers and tried to exploit it. They didn't have the gumption by that point, the oomph to do it, so they suck us on it, the U.S. on it, and the U.S. shattered a democracy so that we could continue to exploit their oil fields because they wanted to nationalize and keep it for themselves and be able to choose who they traded with.
Mm-hmm.
So we chose to just tell you, you don't get the right to make those decisions. Also, we're going to put into power the king again because, and then that king who was salty became an absolute monarch backed by our guns. And a lot of the people, unfortunately, they went to the other end of that extreme. People who they may have blown off as being too far, too much of a zealot, whatever. They're like, well, it's got to be better than what we're dealing with.
Honestly, it is. You and I have discussed the French Revolution.
Yeah.
The initial revolution, great, people in power. No, somebody else bad took power.
Mm-hmm. And it's
And
just
the
one of those
pendulum
things.
has to swing. And
Yeah.
it will swing both ways. So here's the thing. Revolution all day long.
Yeah. It just meant and like we like to do this here where we point to like, well, look at all these old photos where women wore quote unquote normal clothes, this, that, and the other thing. And they were able to go to universities and stuff. And that's all true. What we're not seeing is that was certain people, certain rich people, things like that. And women did have rights and did have those things. And that was all taken away. That part's true. And we have to look ourselves in the mirror and realize we're the reason that happened.
Yep.
Right? Because the minority was able to get enough of a foothold to take over. And it is very anti-American. And it is very all that because of the things our country did, what the Western world had done to them. and it hardened their hearts, right? And now people, especially younger populations, are realizing this is bullshit, but if we're upset with how things are going over there, we have to look at ourselves too.
Always.
And because, right, it was not inevitable, because that's a narrative that happens a lot here, is that these people are just all religious zealots over there, and that was never true. More modern times, it has become true because we exploited them to that point. And then also endorsed others, whether you look at like Saudi Arabia, who's able to make a lot of conquests and stuff because A, the way we partition things, and B, because the British, the French, the US back that horse and that family more than others. And we do a very good job of just backing horses that we think are going to benefit us the most, rather than the people there, and letting them help figure out some of their problems and actually standing by our ideals.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, so the existence of a Roman legionary on the Limes Germanicus was defined by a paradoxical blend of rigid discipline and surprisingly deep integration with the frontier environment, because of course it was, right? You're stationed there your whole damn life. You're going to get married and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
For the 8 men who made up the Pantubernium, the most basic unit of the Roman army, life was lived in a constant proximity. They shared a single room in the barracks of a fort, like at Salzburg, where they slept, cleaned their equipment, prepared their own meals from raw grain rations. This forced intimacy, created by psychological bonds, that was the true backbone of the Roman war machine. Their diet was dominated by heavy sour bread and thick wheat porridge called pulse, washed down with posca, a mixture of water and vinegar that acted as primitive sports drinks, which sounds gross. The image of the soldier is often one of constant combat, and the archaeological record shows that these men were primarily laborers. They spent their days in brick kilns, at stone quarries, or digging the massive trenches that formed the border defenses, essentially engineering the very landscape to reflect Roman order. So, like, we have this idea that they're like on the walls with their weapons in hand. That's not really actually what's happening. Like, they just they're soldier in name, but in this peacetime, they gotta keep them doing something. So, manual labor it is.
Mm-mm.
Just outside the Roman walls of these forts, vibrant and chaotic civilian world known as the Vicus flourished. These settlements were the true melting pots of the frontiers. Despite official prohibitions on marriage for serving soldiers, many legionaries formed long-term domestic partnerships, many not consensual, because they would buy a slave, with local Germanic or Celtic women. The vicus housed the taverns,
Indeed.
bathhouses, and markets where Roman silver flowed into the pockets of local
Mm-hmm.
traders in exchange for beer, meat, and leather. Over generations, this created a unique frontier culture where the line between Roman and barbarian began to blur. The sons of these unofficial unions often grew up to enlist in Roman auxiliaries, which auxiliaries is a fascinating term that you hear get thrown around a lot, especially by the Empire period. They are not. They're like the kind of the people that they use first. They're like not. They're Roman. They're in the Roman army, but cult society in like Rome, they would not be considered real Romans. So they're expendable, but also special ops in some cases because they're able to do things that aren't
Mm-hmm.
trained in the normal Roman schools. So,
Yeah.
further entrenching the military's role as the primary engine of social and cultural assimilation in the North.
Mm-hmm. So while the Romans were busy building their world of stone and law, the Germanic tribes on the other side of the river were undergoing a radical political transformation. In the early days of contact, the Germans were fragmented into hundreds of small, fiercely independent clans. However, centuries of exposure to Rome acted as a catalyst for a process often called the Roman mirror. Germanic elites who served in the Roman army, learning their tactics, logistics, and organizational structures, returned to their tribes with a new vision of power. They realized that small clans could not withstand the might of the empire, but a unified confederation could. This led to the birth of the supertribes like the Franks and the Alemanni, which were not single ethnic groups but broad military alliances centered around powerful war kings. The shift from tribal councils to centralized military leadership was fueled by the massive influx of Roman wealth. Through subsidies paid by the empire to keep peace, specific chieftains gained the resources to maintain a permanent comitatus, an elite retinue of professional warriors who were either loyal to the leader personally rather than the tribe as a whole. This broke the old egalitarian structure of the Germanic thing and replaced it with a martial hierarchy. By the time of the Marcomannic Wars in the 2nd century CE, the Romans were no longer facing disorganized raiders, but a sophisticated coalition of warriors who had learned how to exploit Roman weaknesses. These confederations were effectively states in waiting, and as climate shifts and the arrival of the Huns from the east began to exert pressure, they were uniquely positioned to not just raid the empire, but to eventually replace its administration entirely. The collapse of the Western Roman frontier was not a single explosive event, but a century-long erosion caused by a perfect storm of environmental, military, and demographic pressures. By the late 4th century, the Limes Germanicus had become less of a wall and more of a sieve. The arrival of the Huns, a nomadic powerhouse from the Eurasian steppes, acted as the final push factor. As the Huns moved westward, they drove the Germanic confederations before them like a tidal wave. One group of Germanic peoples, the Goths, specifically the Visigoths, were the first to be pushed across the Danube in massive numbers. Unlike previous groups that sought to raid, these were entire nations seeking asylum. When the Roman administration failed to feed and settle them fairly, the Visigoths revolted, leading to the catastrophic Roman defeat at the Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE, where an emperor was killed and the myth of Roman invincibility was permanently shattered.
And this could be its own rabbit hole, but I am going to just kind of plug in one of my favorite podcasts in here. The latest season of Ancient History Fangirl really dives into this period specifically, and they have a fantastic episode on kind of about this particular topic, specifically like where the Huns are coming in and people are trying to flee, and the Romans kind of pull an ice. It just brutal. You know, these people are left to die and suffer, and then like when they go to the Romans for help, they're enslaved. Like it's so messed up. Like, and a lot of times they would take the kids, separate them, and then kill the parents. It's heavy stuff. But it's a rabbit hole, and this episode's already long, so I would recommend checking them out. So anyway, so just as an aside, we have been painting with broad strokes here. And we're just doing this to do some world building. Each of these different groups we're talking about and about to talk about have their own unique stories. But for the sake of keeping this narrative on track, we're going to focus on the forest rather than the trees, so to speak. Maybe at some point we will do some episodes that explore these individual cultures, though. So getting back to the story, the symbolic end of the frontier came on New Year's Eve in 406 CE. And the reason I say symbolic is because there's a lot of people who decide, oh, this is the end of Rome. And we're not touching that with a 10-foot pole. But this is like a good one to kind of like for our sake, right? According to the tradition, the Rhine froze solid, allowing a massive coalition of Vandals, Alans, and Suebi to walk across the river into Gaul, bypassing those Roman forts entirely. This was a turning point because the empire no longer had the reserves to push them back. While the Vandals eventually carved a path all the way to North Africa, the Visigoths under Alaric remained in the heart of the empire itself, eventually sacking the city of Rome itself in 410 CE. This event sent shockwaves through the Mediterranean world. For the first time in 800 years, the Eternal City had fallen to a Germanic tribe. However, the Goths did not want to destroy Rome so much as they wanted to be a part of it. At least that's what the Romans say. Grain of salt. Complicated.
Big grain of salt.
Complicated. More in my interpretation of it, it's more that they wanted what was theirs. Romans promised them crap, and then they just kept going back on it. And they were like, finally, screw it, we're taking it. They sought titles, land, and legitimacy because of those things I had just said. Like, you're kidnapping people. We need a land that's ours to govern. If you're not going to help us, then allow us to govern ourselves. And this would transition them from the barbarian invaders to these like federated allies who governed Roman populations in the name of the emperor. Like, they're even willing to do that. They're like, we can just be like, not even a client kingdom, so much as like a state with rights, and like, we aren't even necessarily wanting to break away. We just want the ability to run this crap better. You guys clearly can't. And we have this guy named Attila knocking on our doors, and we don't like him. So allow us the ability to govern ourselves and like run this crap. But Rome, like any empire, don't like that. So let's go into some of these groups, right? While the Goths dominated the Mediterranean Spain, it was a different story unfolding in the north. The Franks, who had long been settled as allies along the lower Rhine, began a slow, methodical expansion into Gaul. Unlike the Goths, the Franks never moved far from their ancestral lands, which gave them a stable power base. Under their leader, Clovis I, the Franks converted to Catholic Christianity rather than the Arian version of Christianity favored by other Germanic tribes. That's a whole rabbit hole. We ain't doing it. So just pinning that. Anyway, this was a masterstroke of diplomacy, as it won them the immediate support of the local Gallo-Roman aristocracy and the church, because we're in that time period where that's becoming important. By the 6th century, the Franks had absorbed most of Gaul, laying the geographical and political foundations of what would eventually become known as the nation of France. Like Franks, France, you see the connection there?
I do.
The transition from Roman provinces to Germanic kingdoms was not a total replacement of culture, but a complex Romano-Germanic synthesis, as we've talked about before. The new Germanic kings realized they could not run a state without that sweet Roman bureaucracy. They kept the Roman tax systems, the Latin language for law and religion, and Roman administrative divisions. I mean, like, why fix it if it ain't broke, right?
Pretty much.
Like, new boss, same business. In Italy.
Under new management.
Yeah, under new management. In Italy, the Ostrogothic king of Theodoric the Great, rather ironically, some might say, styled him as a protector of Roman culture, repairing the Colosseum and even maintaining the Senate. In the fields of Germania, the old longhouses also began to evolve into early manorial estates of the Middle Ages. The warrior culture of the Germanic comitatus merged with the remnants of Roman land ownership to create the early seeds of feudalism. By the time the Western Roman Empire officially ended, quote, at the end of 476 CE, the Germanic tribes were no longer the outsiders peering through the trees of the Hercynian Forest. They were the new landed elite. But despite what some of the old history books and Romans themselves might tell you, the transition from Roman province to Germanic kingdom was not a sudden collapse of civilization, but rather a slow blending of two worlds. While the Roman Empire as a political entity faded, its infrastructure, religion, administrative traditions were all kept alive by the very barbarians who moved into its borders. Each region of Western Europe experienced this new transformation differently, creating unique cultural footprints of the modern nations we recognize today. The Franks, for example, were unique among the migrating tribes because they did not abandon their ancestral lands in northern Germania, instead expanding outwards from them. This gave them that massive strategic advantage as they maintained a constant flow of Germanic warriors while absorbing the rich Roman culture of central and southern Gaul. Under the leadership of Clovis I, the Frankish kingdom became a pioneer of that Romano-Germanic synthesis. By converting to Catholicism, the religion of the Roman majority, rather than that Arian sect favored by other tribes, Clovis secured the loyalty of those Gallo-Roman bishops and aristocrats because he knew where to get butter for his bread.
Yep.
This alliance turned the Frankish military into the defenders of church, a role that would eventually culminate in the reign of Charlemagne. The legacy of the Franks is etched into the very name of France in their Salic law, a blend of Germanic tribal customs and Roman style legal codification, governed much of Europe for centuries, including women not inheriting anything.
Mm-hmm.
We don't love that part.
Damn it.
Mm.
No.
Influencing everything from property rights to royal succession.
So, the Visigoths had perhaps the most tumultuous journey of all the Germanic tribes, traveling from the edges of the Black Sea through Italy and southern France before finally settling in the Iberian Peninsula. They were a Gothic people who emerged in the Balkans during late antiquity, likely descendant from the Thervingi, who entered the Roman Empire in 376 and defeated the Romans at the Battle of Adrianople in 378. They were first united under Alaric I, whose forces alternately fought and allied with Rome before famously sacking the city in 410. In 418, the Visigoths were settled as Foederati in southern Gaul, establishing a kingdom with its capital as Toulouse. From there, they expanded into Hispania, displacing the Suebi and Vandals. Defeated by the Franks under Clovis I at the Battle of Vouillé, ended Visigothic rule in Gaul. But the kingdom consolidated in Spain and Portugal, where it endured for 2 centuries. In Spain, they established a sophisticated kingdom centered in Toledo. Unlike the Franks, who blended into the population quickly, the Visigoths initially remained a distinct warrior caste. The Visigoths are also remembered for their cultural and religious transformation of Iberia. Under King Richard I, they converted from Arian Christianity into Nicene Christianity at the Third Council of Toledo in 589, integrating with their Hispano-Roman subjects and strengthening royal legitimacy. However, they were ardent admirers of Roman law because who wouldn't be? Look at all those laws and codes. They produced the Liber Iudicorium, the Visigothic Code, which was one of the most advanced legal systems of the early Middle Ages. This legal code remained influential in Iberian law until the late Middle Ages. Their Visigothic code abolished legal distinctions between Goths and Romans, creating a common identity as Hispani. This meant the code applied to both Romans and Goths equally. The kingdom also fostered churches and artistic treasures, such as the treasure of Guarazar. Ultimately, in 711...
Funny. The gas station.
I'm sorry, that's always going to be funny. The Visigothic king... It's the gas station! Ultimately, in 711, The Visigothic kingdom collapsed after defeat by an army who conformed to a new upstart religion from far in the east who called themselves the Umayyads. It would all come to an end at the Battle of Guadalete, where King Roderick was killed. In the north, the kingdom of Asturias soon emerged under Pelagius, marking the beginning of a period called Reconquista. Despite their fall, the Visigoths left a lasting legacy through their legal system, cultural influence, and role in the formation of medieval Iberia.
In Britannia, the Germanic arrival was far more disruptive than on the continent. The Roman legions withdrew in 410 CE. Maybe because Alaric was invading? The Romano-British population was abandoned and left to fend for themselves against the migration, raids, and invasions of the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes from what is today northern Germany and Denmark. And it is a little complicated because I've heard both sides of it where it was like, oh no, it wasn't an invasion. It was a slow transition. And then others are saying, look, the archaeology supports that there was definitely a hard invasion. I think that probably is a bit of both, but you know. And then if the Romano-British or the Romans are pulling out, I could see it. But it's complicated. The transition from Roman Britannia to Anglo-Saxon England was a complex process of cultural evolution rather than simple overseas transplantation. Before Roman authority collapsed around 410, the province had already been deeply interconnected with Germanic regions through trade, conflict, and the Roman military's heavy recruitment of Rhine region soldiers. Early coastal defenses, known as the Saxon Shore, were established to repel North Sea raiders as Roman field armies were withdrawn to support the imperial usurpers on the continent. The local Romano-British administration was left vulnerable to incursions from the Picts and Scots. Faced with these threats, local leaders, most famously the proud tyrant Vortigern, reportedly invited Germanic mercenaries, Saxons, Angles, and Jutes, to settle in Britain as foederati, or treaty-bound soldiers, in exchange for land. While historical chronicles like those of Bede place this advent in the middle of the 5th century, archaeological evidence from sites such as Sponge Hill suggests a much earlier and more gradual migration that had started as early as the 4th century. This period saw a rapid decline in Roman material culture, replaced by Germanic styles as the native population adapted to a new social order characterized by localized tyrannies and the breakdown of central imperial control. The emerging Anglo-Saxon identity was a synthesis of continental immigrants and indigenous Britons rather than a total population replacement. Genetic studies indicate that while there was significant large-scale migration from the northern Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark, the resulting population was a mix of continental and British Iron Age ancestry. This fusion reflected in linguistic record. Early, quote, Anglo-Saxon royalty in the kingdoms like Wessex and Mercia often bore British or Celtic origins, such as Cerdic and Penda. Ultimately, the culture developed through the integration of diverse immigrant groups and local populations, eventually consolidating into the dominant socio-political force in lowland Britain by the 7th century. Unlike the Goths or Franks, these groups were not federates of Rome. They were pagan settlers who would eventually largely displace or marginalize those Romano-British elite. Kind of the opposite tactic of the Franks, to be honest. As a result, the Latin language and Roman administrative systems almost completely vanished from the landscape, replaced by dialects that would evolve into Old English. Early Anglo-Saxon life was rooted in Scandinavian Germanic pagan heritage, where worship occurred at natural sites like sacred trees and wells, often emphasizing the spiritual significance of the horse as companion to the gods. This belief system was not immediately erased by Christianity. Instead, a cultural synthesis occurred, epitomized by the poet Caedmon, who blended Germanic oral traditions with Christian scripture. By the 10th century, this religious landscape was increasingly defined by the Benedictine monasticism, particularly through reforms at centers like Glastonbury and Winchester, which transformed monasteries into vital hubs of literacy, standardized learning, and literary production. Social and economic life centered on the churl, a free, arms-bearing farmer who formed the basic unit of a kinship-based production system. Settlements transitioned from shifting tribal enclosures towards permanent, nucleated villages and specialized craft towns, where names like Sutterton or Shoemakerstown reflected the emerging economic specializations. Governance was often itinerant, with kings traveling between royal vills to collect food renters and dispense justice, a mobile administrative model that eventually gave way to the more static manorial system that came to define the late Anglo-Saxon period. The legacy of the Anglo-Saxons is most profoundly felt through structural foundations of the English language and the unified British state, and I would argue the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings series.
Indeed.
Because I just feel like when it, like so much of what Tolkien took was from these Germanic peoples, especially the Anglo-Saxons. But like when you're thinking of like literally the Shire, like that's where this comes from,
Yeah.
right? So, which he makes it very idyllic. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, there's a. I think honestly that's nice because this is kind of known as the Dark Ages a lot of the time, and
Yeah.
as we're seeing, it's not that dark. Dark for who, I guess, right?
Dark in
And
terms of what?
right.
It's
I
all about
mean,
perspective.
like you lost the Roman light. We saw that was honestly a shit show most of the time. So, you know, different, sure. But I don't think dark is the right word, But
Yeah.
at any rate, they successfully transformed a collection of warring tribal kingdoms into a cohesive nation, establishing administrative divisions such as shires, which is another word for counties, and hundreds that persisted into local government today. Their legal innovations, including early forms of community-based justice and the Wittegenmont Council of Advisors, laid the groundwork for English common law and the eventual development of parliamentary governments. Furthermore, the Anglo-Saxon era birthed a resilient literary tradition that transitioned from oral epics like Beowulf to sophisticated vernacular prose, ensuring that the Germanic core of English identity remained intact despite the subsequent Norman conquest. Those dirty German Frenchmen that they were.
I know.
Isn't that so weird, right? Because I mean, the Normans were themselves Vikings,
Mm-hmm.
which is a descendant of these Germanic peoples, right? If maybe the ancestor, yeah, it's up in the air with that.
Pretty
But
much.
just interesting. And then even the Franks,
Yep. No,
it's interesting.
it's amazing how people branch off and then it's like they come home. It's like they go
Yeah,
away and they come back and they go away and they come back. They're like waves.
yeah, and I think that the big difference too is like I don't know. It's like you almost get this like weird intersection of like between the Anglo Saxons and the Scandinavians at this point. It's like who's the more original of the
Does
Germanic peoples, I guess, right?
does it
And
matter?
it doesn't matter, but it's interesting, It like in the sense of these are topics people talk about today, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Beowulf was always attributed, like when I was in high school and stuff, to like these Germanic epics,
Mm-hmm.
and yet it was written in Anglo-Saxon England,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and when they were firmly Christian. So it's just very interesting to me, you know, there's this argument going on today, and I would say like side by side, yeah, the cultures are very different, but it goes to pose more to like they came from a original root culture,
Mm-hmm.
and on each side, I think some kept certain parts of that culture and got rid of others. Right.
Oh, of
The
course.
Anglo-Saxons kind of kept this like the way they do war, the honor codes and things like that, and like you like literally mark off the field and like, the
Yeah.
hearth were odd and all that, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then I think that
Almost
it
treating war
seems
like a
like
game.
yeah, but then like the Scandinavians only, oh, I think kept more of the magic part of it.
Yeah.
The and again, like this is me as not a professional in this field at all, just kind of speculating, right? It just
Mm-hmm.
seems interesting. It's almost like you've got these two groups that like they're very different than their ancestor, but both of them like to claim, oh, we're the most like that ancestor, right?
It's
But
both. It's both
yeah,
because humanity is not necessarily just something that you can organize. We are all very complex individuals, and societies are even more complex than that. You have people that are jack of
hmm
all trades, master of none. You have people that are specialists. You have people that are generalists. Like you're going to have that. You're going
hmm
to have that mix and match. And neither one is
yeah,
incorrect in that they
hmm
are a callback, but at the same time, oh, we are the best or we are the only, that is the incorrect point.
correct. Or the original, the most original, and it's like
Yeah.
like most to the origin, not original as I stand out, but origin, like the root of it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
so speaking of that, though, from the names of our weekdays, so like Wednesday for Woden to fundamental principles of our legal systems, their influence remains a cornerstone of modern Western societies, at least the ones, you know, impacted by Britain.
Yeah. And so, lastly, the story of Italy, the homeland of Rome itself, was one of two successive Germanic waves. First came the Ostrogoths under Theodoric the Great, who attempted to create a dual state. Theodoric was a Romanized Germanic king who lived in a palace in Ravenna, dressed in purple and maintained the Roman state, using his Goths only as a military shield to protect the Roman population. However, this delicate balance was destroyed by the Byzantine Wars, leaving the doors open for the Lombards. The Lombards were less Romanized and even more aggressive, settling in the north and central regions. They had previously settled in the Middle Danube in the 5th century, near what is now Austria, Slovenia, and Hungary. Their previous homeland was in the north, near present day Hamburg. Roman era historians in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD mention the Lombards as one of the Suebian peoples and report them having living on the lower Elbe already in the early 1st century. Their legacy is preserved in the name of the Lombardy region and in a distinct architectural style known as the Lombard Romanesque, characterized by thick walls and intricate stone carvings. They also left a lasting mark on Italian law and in the northern Italian dialects, which contain hundreds of words of Germanic origin related to land and warfare. Now, there are no contemporary accounts of the Lombards in the 3rd or 4th century, or for most of the 5th century, which is when they reappear near the Danube River far to the south. Legendary accounts of the Lombard migration are found in several early medieval texts, the oldest being the Regio Gentis Langobardorium, origin of the Lombard people. The Lombard king Audwin defeated the Gepid leader, Thurisind, in 551 or 552 AD, and Audwin's successor, Albuin, eventually destroyed the remaining Gepids in 567 AD. The Lombards have settled further south in Pannonia in modern-day Hungary. Near Zolad, archaeologists have unearthed burial sites of Lombard men and women being buried together as families, unusual among Germanic peoples at the time. Following
Which
Albuin,
again shows that these people are not a monolith.
no,
Like
they are not.
it's like, oh, it's unusual for German people. Like, yeah, but again, that's what the idea that they're this like unified thing. They're not.
No, they
It's good for
have
their
so
culture.
many different things going on.
Yeah.
Following Albuin's victory over the Gepids, he led his people into northeastern Italy, which had become severely depopulated and devastated by the long Gothic War from 535 to 554. Like that's a long time. That's like 20
Mm-hmm.
years. That's a
Yeah,
long
that's
time.
yeah. I mean, imagine like people were born and became adults and started having children all within this war.
Within it. So
Like,
like, oh my god.
like
That's
someone could be
ridiculous.
born, like at the beginning at 535, and then by 554 they're what, like 19 years old, and this is the
Yeah.
ancient world. So that's
So they're
yeah,
potentially married, having babies and everything already. Like, what the fuck?
yeah.
Guys. Damn.
Even today though, that would be wild, right? Like imagine
Yeah.
living your entire childhood into high school when you become 18 plus one more year,
I
all in
mean,
one war.
technically, Iraq and Iran. But I'm going to say,
But
we're moving past it. We're
yeah,
moving past it.
well, I just meant more like imagine it being here, right?
Yeah.
Like on our doorstep,
Yeah.
like in our backyards, literally. Like, yes, we had a lot of war, like we're always at war in this country, but
True.
like that's all so far away versus this is
Yes.
like in your backyard.
More so, I was saying like, hey, it's been going on over there because of
Yeah.
consistently
Mm-hmm.
blended. Yeah. So, long Gothic War. So that was between the Byzantine Empire and the Austro-Gothic kingdom, right? The Lombards were joined by numerous Saxons, Herulds, Gepids, Bulgars, Thuringians, and Ostrogoths, and their invasion of Italy was almost unopposed. By late 569 AD, they had conquered all of northern Italy and the principal cities north of the Po River, except Pavia, which fell in 572 AD. At the time, they occupied areas in central and southern Italy. So by the 6th century, these regions were no longer truly Roman, nor were they purely Germanic. They had become something entirely new. It's like mixing colors together.
Mm-hmm.
They make something new.
Yeah, and again, like purely Germanic, like we've been saying, like what even is
Mm-hmm.
that? But yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
I would say it's like you said, it's blending on blending on blending, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
getting all these new colors. Not that they're all the same color, because no,
No,
but
definitely not.
but yeah, I mean, and it's fascinating. It's why we talk about this, because like while their common language and some of their core cultural beliefs are there, and like that's why we're seeing them in all these places,
Mm-hmm.
how they blended with those local people who were also themselves blended, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
Franks going into Gaul, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the Ostrogoths and stuff going into like Byzantium and
Mm-hmm.
Italy. Those are going to blend completely differently. They're going to have you have Greco culture in one, you have Rome and Slavic cultures that are migrating inward. You've got
Mm-hmm.
Italian cultures and Mediterranean culture in another. Then you've got the Celts and like those specific tribes and stuff that have been blending with heavily by that point with like
Oh yeah.
the Romans. And then you where it's definitely more of like a Celtic Roman blend, but they've also been having relations with Germans for years. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, you're going to have all these different, and those Germans are more from Scandinavia versus other ones are from areas as far away as Hungary, which is nowhere near there, like, so
That's a
I think
decent
it's fascinating.
fireplace. Yeah. No, it's amazing because seeing all of these waves of people flowing back and forth and it really just reminds me of a beach because every time the tide goes out, it's taking some of the sediment with it, but every time the tide comes in, it's taking another section of sediment with it. And so you're going to have this wonderful blend from both sides, and it's going to
Yeah, it's
evolve over time.
yeah, and it redistributes things. It's kind of, and honestly, my analogy would be like it's like a kaleidoscope, right? The colors overlap, then they separate again, and like it's a It feels like
Absolutely.
it's both chaotic, but there's a pattern at the same time, and it's just hard to follow. Which is the challenge for scholars and historians and stuff and archaeologists. But like you would not look at a kaleidoscope and go, "Oh, it's just all one color."
Oh
You
God,
know,
no. Then it's not a fun
so
kaleidoscope, is it?
right.
But the Germanic kings provided the military security, while the Roman Church and surviving aristocrats provided the literacy and administrative expertise. This Romano Germanic society was the crucible of the Middle Ages. The old Roman villas were becoming the centers of medieval manners, and the Germanic warband was evolving into the knightly class. The rugged, untamed world of ancient Germania had not just conquered Rome, it had merged into it to build the foundation of Western civilization. The untamed Germania and Caesar and Tacitus had described had successfully migrated into the ruins of the empire, bringing with them a culture of personal loyalty and warrior ethics that would define the European Middle Ages for the next 1,000 years. So, while that probably seemed like a lot, we actually summarize like 2,000 plus years of history of a large section of the world, of hundreds of cultures, in just under 2 hours. There are so many things that we can dive into, like the cultures themselves, the legends, the sagas, the myths, and the individuals. But this season, like we hinted at the beginning, isn't like the last one. This time, we are covering the world of Germanic magic. We are starting with the ancient pagan traditions and how women uniquely filled this role. Then we will fast forward to one of the greatest tragedies in history, the German witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries. By doing this, we will hope to explore how we went from one extreme to the other and what we can really learn from it. So, next time, we will start with a powerful and beloved goddess in Norse mythology, known for love, beauty, fertility, gold, war, and of course, magic. The goddess Freya.
If you like what you heard today, please give us a positive review on whatever platform you are listening to this on. It goes a long way for us to appease the algorithm gods and get this suggested to others just like you. The more we can connect to our fellow history nerds, the more we can build up a community and keep the show going.
Also, we have a Patreon where you can hang out with us and get exclusive content, like videos where we might try to make some ancient recipes, talk about topics that couldn't fit into the main arcs of the podcast, and just generally being batshit and dumpster fires, all for the price of a latte per month. Research materials and books cost a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time for us to create this show, so anything that you can provide would be a huge help.
We can't wait to see you again next week, and as always, thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Bye, guys.